Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to talk about one amazing value mountain bike. It's a hardtail, meaning it has a front suspension but no rear suspension. It's a bike that is priced at 379 euros and that offers a tremendous amount of value for this price point. I'm talking about the Rockrider 530 ST. The woman edition specifically. That's a bike that I bought as a gift for my girlfriend. It was 3 months ago and she's been doing 300 kilometers on it so far. So she's been sharing her impressions with me about this bike, but she doesn't like the camera too much. So I'm gonna give you the feedback that she gave me and talk to you a little bit about the build kit and why this bike is really amazing for the money. So for the context, I'm personally quite a serious rider, some kind of bike nerd if you want, and I ride mountain bike and road bike in the French Alps, and I've been doing that for the last 25 years. So I'm very specific about the component choice, the value of a bike, and so on. And I personally own much higher end bikes, but I started with my own money when I was very young, buying some very entry-level bikes, and this is one bike I would have loved to have to ride. So there are two editions of this bike, the 530 for men and for women, and the adaptations Decathlon have been doing for the women edition is very interesting. Let's dive into it. What are the pros of this bike? So first of all, it's a very good looking bike, and the pictures taken by Decathlon online doesn't make it justice. The color scheme is very nice. The color matching made between the frame, the stem and the wheel stickers is really well done, and honestly the finish is good as well. The wheels on the frame are great, and all in all this goes for a very nice package as a whole. If you see it on the street, you could think that this is a much more expensive bike, maybe 800-700 euros bike. It's not. It's really much more affordable than that. And then of course there is the price. We just mentioned it. If you want to find a comparable spec on a bike from any other brand, again, this bike is 379 euros, that's 450 US dollars or 340 pounds. If you want to find something similar, you might, start finding brands that are doing that for 500 euros. So it's I don't know how Decathlon did it, honestly. Then the transmission. The transmission is the package of the gears and the chain and everything. And sometimes on entry-level bikes, you are pretty limited, meaning that you either have a limited range for this transmission, meaning that you're not able to pedal easily enough or hard enough, depending on the terrain, if you go up or downhill, or the shift quality, the smoothness of the shifter, and the way the gears are passing from one speed to the next can be poor. It's not the case here. Decathlon has been working with a brand that is doing some amazing job on entry-level bikes. It's called Microshift, and you've got a 1x transmission with only one front cog and 9 rear speeds. And this 1x transmission allows the chain to stay on the same cog up front, meaning that you only have one shifter to deal with. That is a very good and easy things to do for beginner, much easier than to play with two shifters at once. The 9 speeds are actually based on a wide range cassette. That means that the smallest cog is 11 tooth and the biggest one is 42 teeth. And that means that even if you have only one cog up front, you'll be able to climb some very steep climbs and pedal quite fast on the flat sections with no issues at all. So the other advantage of a 1x transmission is that the front cog has, and it's the case here on this Decathlon, something we only started to find on high-end mountain bikes 6 or 7 years ago, and at this price point, I don't think that exists. It's a narrow, wide chainring, and that's made basically to improve the chain retention on the front cog, on the chainring. And what it does is it's got one teeth that is wide, one that is narrow, etc., all around it. And what it means is that it fits the chain perfectly, and the narrow teeth go into the narrow holes of the chain, and the wide in the wide. That means that you cannot drop your chain nearly as easily as 2x transmission that have two front cogs with a derailleur that is supposed to move the chain easily from one chainring to the next. And here you've got something that's really designed to be on one front, system, one front gear, and that cannot move from here. So the bike can be moved around, and the probability of losing your chain is reduced by that much. I've been talking about the clutch on the rear derailleur, and the clutch is this system that can lock the way the derailleur can unfold itself, therefore improving the chain retention and the chain tension. So here again, this is something that works quite well. The bike can move a lot and be rolling on some kind of rocks and be vibrating a lot, and you'll still have your chain that will be nicely tensed. And so this will also reduce the noise. So all of those details around the transmission are great, especially here at a price like this one. Then you can find also some hydraulic disc brakes that are working very well with 160mm rotors front and rear on this bike. And hydraulic disc brakes means many things. The first is an easily reached and pulled lever. The feel of the hydraulic fluid is much nicer, much better than a cable actioned disc brake. A disc brake is also less sensible to humidity and water. As you're going to mountain bike outside, you might go into a lot of water, across a little bit of a river or something like that. And when you're having brakes with pads against the rim, the traditional brakes that we had on bikes for years now, then if the rim is wet, your braking performance will be affected. Here the disc is much closer to the center of the wheel and gets much hotter when you start activating it. And the material between the pads and the disc itself make it almost insensible to the water. So the braking performance will remain much more consistent on every kind of terrain and conditions. Also, the power required to reach a certain amount of braking power is much lesser than a mechanic disc brake on an hydraulic disc brakes, meaning that you need less power to activate your brakes, and therefore you gain control and security on the bike, especially on longer descents. So it's all good here, and it's very rare to find a hydraulic disc brakes on a bike at this price point, and this one works fairly good after a short period of bedding in the brakes, because there is a thin film on the pads when they are new that you need to take off by braking a little bit during one ride or two. After that, the performance stabilizes and it works very nicely. Then I've been testing the bike myself, and I've been pushing it to much more than what its supposed intent and design are supposed to be. I've been really pushing the bike hard, and what I can tell you is that the bike feels really rigid and healthy. It doesn't move around. You can put down a lot of power on the pedals and the frame is going to be really rigid. It doesn't mean uncomfortable, we'll talk to that a bit later, but really rigid, and all the energy that you're putting into the pedals is going to propulse you forward, and that's a great feel. Next, this is a woman-specific bike, and the adjustments made by Decathlon on this bike, especially for women, are great. First, they narrowed the handlebar to, I think, 62 centimeters wide when it's 68 for men. Don't, I should check the measurements on that, but I'm sure that the handlebar is narrower than the men's counterpart version of this bike. And it's made specifically for narrow shoulders that women have compared to men. The other adjustment is the length of the stem. The stem is this little part that fix the fork to the handlebar, and they made it shorter, and it's 60 millimeters long, when on the male version of the bike it's 80 millimeters long, because the torso of women can also sometimes be a little bit shorter, meaning that the reach they have with their hands and arms and torso can be a little bit shorter. So to improve comfort and to raise the riding position, they put a shorter stem here, and that's a very nice idea. A short stem also have a benefit, putting a little bit more your weight behind the front wheel. It's feeling better in downhill. You'll see like old school cross country or road bikes are very, very forward looking bikes with long stems. So that means that it's very cool on the uphills, but when you go downhill, this is where you need control and it feels bad. And there Decathlon put a relatively short stem on the bike. That's a great idea. Again, in the woman specific touch, you've got these grips on the bike, and the grips are very soft, very comfortable, and my girlfriend has been riding the bike quite a bit. She always had sore hands, and she doesn't with this one, so that's a very, very good news as well. To go with the comfort and control over the direction of the bike, you can also find a telescopic fork that is actually customizable. It's based on a spring, so you can adjust do some pre-adjustment of the spring, meaning that if you're a lighter rider, you can make the fork easier to activate and react, and if you're a heavier rider, you can make the fork feel a little bit harder as well. So this also improves the control of the bike. And the last thing that's been adapted for women on this bike is the saddle. And again, my girlfriend has always had trouble finding a saddle that worked for her on the multiple bikes I own, and I don't put specifically hard saddles or anything on the bike. But on this bike, she's been able to ride for 2 or 3 hours long without any pain. So that's a great point here for Decathlon as well. Now, let's talk a little bit about the purchasing experience. We went to a store. The online stock announced wasn't exactly right, so we had to go to the store twice or 3 times to find this bike. It's hard to find. I don't know if it's because it's selling well, or if it's because the COVID crisis made it hard for Decathlon to actually have the parts at hand from China, probably from their suppliers. I have no idea, but when we finally found the bike, we were able to purchase it, and we had a mechanic from Decathlon taking the bike and preparing it much better than what I would have expected from a brand that is basically a supermarket in France. So they took the bike, they verified the tire pressure, they verified that every bolt was tightened correctly, they verified all the gears, made those adjustments here, they checked the brake, they checked the lights, they've been checking the saddle, they adjusted the saddle height to the specific height of my girlfriend, and they've been doing all that in less than an hour. So we went in and out of this shop with this bike perfectly set up for her, with no fuss, so no problem here. Very good experience. Now, the cons of this bike. We've been talking about the seat, but under the seat there is this seat post, and on most seat posts on higher end bikes you can actually manage the inclination of the saddle, because if you change the saddle, the new saddle might be a little bit more like forward facing or backward facing. But here with this bike you have a seat post that is not adjustable. You cannot change the saddle balance and alignment horizontally. So be sure, if you want to change the saddle, if you can, to bring the bike in the store, put the saddle in and verify that it works well. Then the tires. The tires here are made to be what Decathlon call like polyvalent, to be compatible with the broadest possible scenarios. So, you know, the knobs, they are not very high here. That means that the rolling resistance is low. You can pedal efficiently on roads and on quite simple trails. But as soon as you've got some rocks and roots, as soon as the terrain becomes a little bit more chaotic, then the control is not great. Also, the width of the weight at 2 inches is a little bit on the narrower side, meaning that you're forced to inflate the tires a little bit more than wider tires that require less pressure. And by putting more pressure, the bike might be bouncing around a little bit too much. And it's also going to diminish the comfort and control that you have over the bike. So tires are not a big deal, but you know, they can have an impact on the confidence you will be feeling on the bike, and therefore they might be important. But tires is something you can swap quite easily. Then the fork, it does a great entry-level job, you know, taking off the edge of most hits, but it's got a little bit of front play. When you brake with the front brake and activate the fork, you know, push the bike front and back, you will see some play. So the precision of riding will be a little bit impacted, and for riders that are more advanced riders or taking on more technical terrains, you will see some limitations here. For my girlfriend, who is a beginner, she's happy with what she has and it actually works great. For another information is that she weighed 45 kilos. She's in the very light end of the weight spectrum, and even with the fork tuned to the lightest possible setting, she couldn't really use more than 5 centimeters of travel. But again, she's never up on the bike and she absolutely is not confident or aggressive in downhill. So I actually think that the spring rate is good for women from 42 kilos to 70 kilos, no problem, as long as you're not too aggressive on the bike on the downhills, it will work fine. There is also only one water bottle mount, meaning that if you want to put one water bottle and maybe one lock sleeve like I did, well, you'll have to strap the lock with like some plastic collars because there are no holes to mount it there. So only one water bottle on the frame. That's a little bit too bad. Then the rims. Something astonishing is that they're supposed to be tubeless compatible. Unfortunately, they have big valves on them, and as far as I'm concerned, I don't know any brand that would be selling tubeless valves that would have the big valves. All of the tubeless setup that I've been doing on my mountain bikes or road bikes are with the small pressure valve, so I don't know if that's something you can find. So I don't know if you'll ever be able to set up the bike tubeless. And then you don't have any protection on the frame where the chain might slap it. So even if you have a 1x drivetrain and a clutch on the derailleur, as soon as the terrain will get a little bit more technical and chaotic, the chain will undoubtedly hit the frame and therefore damage the paint. They've been putting a thin layer of plastic here, but it will never be enough to really protect the frame, so you'll have to add some frame protection here. That's all for this video. I hope you liked the review. I'm sorry if the sound wasn't that great. I'm not a professional YouTuber, but I hope that you found what you were looking for. If that's the case, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and activate notification if you want. It will help the content a lot being pushed by the YouTube algorithm. And I wish you a great day and a nice ride. Bye.